Going on, everybody? It is Thursday, and it is time for WaPo Stomo, also known as Washington Post Story Mode. And you may have noticed by now that I am not Nathan Grayson, and she is not Shannon Liao. Both of our colleagues are sick this week, so we are going to do our darned best to fill in their stead. I am Mike Hume. I'm the editor of Launcher, and I'm joined by Alyse Stanley. Alyse, tell the
Hi.
folks at home hello.
Hi, I'm a copy editor, assignment editor that works with freelancers, and sometimes write reviews, and appear on stream like today.
Just, just someone of so many skills that cannot be contained by any sort of sentence, no matter how long it runs on. But
That's why I'm 6 feet tall. It's all that skill packed.
while we lack a lot of Nathan and Shannon's gifts, particularly Nathan's LED background and his cat, most notably of all, at least we'll make up for this in the cat department, though. Hopefully, we'll have a cameo later. What we do have ample, an abundant amount of today is news, and let's start with breaking news because that's what we do here at the Washington Post. Just up now on launcher.gg, E3 2022 has been officially canceled. Previously, the Electronic Software Administration, sorry, I've been talking furiously for the last half hour, announced that they would not hold an in-person version of the event out of concerns for COVID-19. But now they're going to fully cancel the digital event as well. This is a bit of a shock for a couple of reasons. First of all, last year at E3 2021, which was held entirely online due to COVID concerns, they started the show by saying they looked forward to returning to in-person events at E3 2022 in Los Angeles. Then they took that away in January, and now there's just no show in general. So it's a pretty considerable and notable turn for the hallmark video game industry convention of the year. At least, obviously, we haven't had long to process this news, but what's your take on all of this? How is this processing right now?
I think it really just underlines how unpredictable the situation has been, and I think E3 is just one of many organizations right now trying to like find a new normal, but then at the same time reckon with the fact that we aren't, coronavirus is still around. A second booster shot just got cleared, and so it's just been very touch and go. And so I think they spoke a little too soon when they were like, "We're definitely gonna be in person," because no one really knows what it's gonna be like a couple months from now, let alone a year from now.
Right. And case in point, GDC just wrapped up. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the findings that Nathan and Shannon had while reporting out there. But the biggest story, arguably, from GDC is how much of a COVID outbreak followed the gathering. And even though they were being tested regularly, people were supposed to be masked indoors. Obviously, as Nathan reported and Shannon reported in the story, that didn't always happen. But a lot of our colleagues in the games industry, including Nathan and Shannon, contracted COVID as a result of that conference. And it's an example of the uncertainty around in-person events in general right now. There is no guarantee. There's even after two vaccines and a booster, and maybe now a second booster, will that do it? Who knows? So the in-person cancellation doesn't surprise me, and personally, I'm not that surprised by the digital cancellation anyway. As we covered E3 last year, there was no luster to it. Like, this is supposed to be the marquee gaming event of the year. This is where Keanu Reeves is supposed to get on stage and get us all hyped for Cyberpunk. You know, can reflect on that for a moment in hindsight. But there was no pizzazz to a lot of the announcements last year. Like Ubisoft's was probably the most notable expo. Even Nintendo's didn't really have too much of note that got people really amped. So, they say they're coming back in 2023, and I think that's pretty key because it needs a revamp. It needs a reboot. So, if this is their equivalent of a year-long delay, and it can improve the product, I think that could be for the best in the long run of the event.
Yep, and I've been seeing on, social media just since the news was announced a little while ago, like RIP E3, and just to reiterate what you said, Mike, E3 is not like donezo. It's coming back next year, but I know there's for the last couple of years, ever since like Sony decided not to come to E3 in 2019, there's been a lot of speculation about what the future of E3 looks like, and I'm sure there are some people who think that this kind of contributes to that speculation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the first thing that popped into a lot of people's heads when they announced the in-person cancellation in January. I mean, just the timing of that seemed a little weird in that Omicron was a thing at that point, sure, but we're still looking at an event in June. And either they had a lot more foresight than the rest of their colleagues on the games industry convention circuit. But at that time, GDC was still planning full speed ahead. Dice was still on track. South by Southwest was still happening. So we had those three major conferences and events all on track to happen. But E3 decided that this was too much, and they were going to bag the in person portion of the event. Which, I think everyone sort of ears perked up at that, and now we don't have a digital event, which obviously could still be executed given COVID concerns. But again, I think it gets back to what you were talking about before with Sony backing out in 2019. Like the sheen had come off the event, and they are now looking for a way to sort of reinfuse some excitement to some of the magic into the event and really make it the marquee event once again. I'll be interested to see what the fallout is from this and what game companies do as a result. My guess is we'll just see more of what we've been seeing, which is companies putting up their own online trailer releases, game reveals. I'm fine with that for right now. If we can't do it in person, I'm fine with that. I won't miss a digital only E3 2022.
Honestly, I find it really interesting. It seems like game publishers are kind of taking a note from the music industry because I feel like this probably would have been like 2017 when Beyonce started just like dropping albums with no preamble. I feel like that's kind of what the major publishers do now. Like Sony, they're like, oh, we have a play tomorrow, or a state of play tomorrow, or Nintendo, especially with the Nintendo Directs, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna announce huge news in 12 hours. And that gets a response. So yeah, they don't really have incentive to stop doing that and go back to this format that they did before.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Just checking in with the chat quickly. Buckman234, sad, but glad that people are taking COVID seriously. I think you speak for us all there. I mean, I think we are trying to press ahead with a new normal, but no one ever said the new normal will look like the old normal. Things are going to change, and I think increased safety precautions are going to be a big part of that. I'm interested to see if big events like this can really fully make a comeback, even as we press ahead. And then James Jackson says, "I'll be surprised if it ever comes back. Major publishers have moved on." And I think that's what I'm most interested to see is can they bring it back? They now say they have a year to work on it. Obviously, they have a lot of members that are involved in game publishing. What can they cook up? What does a good new version of E3 look like that incorporates digital and in-person events? I think, they're setting a pretty high bar for themselves now. I mean, I think that's what they're doing. So,
I think whatever new format they find, I think the most success they're gonna find is probably through like embracing live streaming and that kind of format where like preset presentations can't really do that. So it's like they're gonna have to embrace what they can add to this that publishers can't themselves.
yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Like, what's the value add?
Yeah.
Why should I, as Sony or Microsoft or I was going to say Activision, but Microsoft, get out of being a part of this event? And there is a critical mass to it. There is as a member of the media, like there's a huge benefit to being there in person and just knocking out a ton of interviews at one place. Checking in with your contacts and just reminding people, hey, like I'm interested in stories. Like let's just get a drink. I will miss that. I've been to E3 twice before COVID struck. I'm eager to go again. I would like Launcher to all get out there and for the rest of the games media industry to get together out there. So here's hoping that it does come back in 2023, and I'll be fascinated to see what shape it actually takes on. But that is just one of the many stories we have for you
That was
today.
just today.
Yeah, that was literally just in the last half hour.
Yep.
My fingers are still tingling from typing. But the next story happened a little bit earlier this week, and that is the release of details around Sony's new PlayStation Plus model. We've been hearing about this for a while with the Project Spartacus talk, so it's not really a surprise, but now we have a lot of concrete details to go with it. We know pricing, we know what it will include, and we know what it won't include. And let's just start by taking you through the package details, so to speak. Let me call this up so I portraying this accurately. But there will now be three tiers: the essential tier, the extra tier, and then what's it, the premium tier. I
Premium.
feel like I should adjust my tie when I say
Yeah.
that. It's not a good tie. Um, the essential package is pretty much what exists now. If you're a current PlayStation Plus subscriber, you'll be rolled into the essential tier when the new service goes live, which will happen in June. Um, the big benefits there: 2 monthly downloadable games. They say exclusive discounts. They don't really offer too many details there. I correct me if I'm wrong, Elise. You may know off the top of your head, but I always thought those discounts were only affixed to pre-orders, which I'm always sketched out a little bit about.
I think
Um,
if I remember correctly, I think I've seen them for release games, but like, you know, after, not within like the first couple of weeks. Like I think I saw Persona 5 Strikers on sale. So it's like after the fact deals.
Yeah, check and maybe fact check us on that too, but that's good to know. The other features, obviously, cloud storage, and then the required tier for online multiplayer access. So that's bare minimum. The pricing there, $60 a year, not a bad deal. $5 a month. That's I feel like most gamers can stomach that. That's not a lot of pain right there. Then the next tier, and this is where we start to get into some of the new features. PlayStation Plus Extra provides all the benefits of the essential tier, and it also adds a catalog of up to 400, and there's an asterisk, which we'll get to momentarily, of the most enjoyable PS4 and PS5 games. So that includes a lot of Sony Studios games, but also third-party partner games. And those games will be downloadable for play. And there's a key distinction there that Gene Park was talking about on Twitter when the news came out. Um, and that is, the downloadable versus streaming. Obviously, if you can download that game, that's good value for the price. And I should mention that this version is $30 or $40 more at $99.99 for the year. But downloadable, like you can get that. All right, there you go. That seems to be a pretty solid value, um, even if it's just 400 of the most enjoyable PS4 and PS5 games. At least, how you feel? Do you think that that price point works for what they're offering there?
I think so. I know there's been a lot of discussion about like playing natively on the system versus like streaming, and I do think that it doesn't offer quite as much as like what Xbox's service does, but it's a step towards that direction.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then the final tier is PlayStation Plus Premium, and there are two asterisks with this one. Uh, Obviously, all the aforementioned benefits plus 340 additional games, including PS3 games available via cloud streaming, and then a catalog of beloved games for both streaming and download from the original PlayStation, PS2, and PSP generations.
That's
Uh,
honestly what I'm most interested in,
yes,
easily.
yes, and I'm fascinated by what games will be involved in those. I'm assuming again, this is completely speculation, but that it will at least contain a lot of the Sony first person or first party titles from those eras, which that'd be nice. That'd be real nice. So, and at only $20 more than the extra tier, 119.99 a year. So obviously a market increase over what people are paying now for PlayStation Plus, but for a year, and you figure like maybe you don't need to go buy every new game right away, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But like for what is actually advertised and offered in that deal, I'm good with that. What do you think?
I might have to see like what that catalog includes, but there's a ton of PSP games and especially PS2. I mean, the PS2 is like the best-selling console of all time, and they both had like such long lifespans that you just can't play them anymore. So I'm definitely interested to see like all the weird, obscure games that I don't have to pay like $300 to get a copy of on eBay.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And personally, like that era, like the PS2 and then early PS3 era was like that's when my lapsed gamer years, where I was out of college and wasn't really focused on gaming that much. I had some other stuff going on, and I just wasn't playing. So, as somebody who's coming back into gaming now, I'm kind of eager to go and see what I missed, and that seems like a good way to do it. Um, Now, obviously, we talked before about some of the caveats, and let me call this article back up here. Um, the cloud streaming uh, is available on PS4 and PS5, as well as PC, which I think is pretty interesting. That to me is indicative of a response to Xbox
Mhm.
and their push onto PC. Obviously, with Microsoft Windows being part of pretty much every PC. But that's interesting, given bringing PC and PlayStation closer together, which we've seen with some of the PlayStation first party games now being released on PC. But this is the most tied together those two platforms have been, I think, in their history. Um, and then as far as those asterisks go, so the pricing could fluctuate based on current market. Um, that is probably not going to vary too much from market to market. Obviously, PlayStation's going to want to keep it pretty uniform. You don't want somebody, one state or one country over getting it for a significant discount. But I think that's worth mentioning. Also, the PC streaming is not going to be available in Japan at launch. That'll come in with a future update. And also, and I think this is probably the biggest asterisk, current markets that can stream are only the ones that currently have PlayStation Now access. So we're talking the US, Canada, Japan, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Austria, Switzerland. Okay, there's a lot more than I thought. Spain, Italy, Portugal, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden. So a lot of countries, but certainly not the totality of the world by any means.
And
Um,
if I remember correctly, that's because the PlayStation Now is being folded into like
right.
that's not going to exist anymore, and it's going to be part of this new three-tiered system.
Correct, correct. Checking in with Chad here. Ben says, I think the PS Plus extra tier is a nice middle ground with the PS4 and PS5 games. A shame they don't want to invest in native PS3 downloads. I agree with that for sure, especially since it feels like it's right on the fence. Like, I'm curious from a technological standpoint, what changed between PS3, PS4 that makes it so much more complicated to port those titles over that you can't emulate a PS3 game on
Mhm.
PS5. I saw some people responding to Gene on Twitter that says, it's absolutely possible, but it will require millions in investments for Sony. Um, I'd be interested to see why. Surely they're going to make millions back off this thing. I'm curious what made that final decision there.
I'm curious too. I can't remember. Was the PlayStation 4 backwards compatible? Don't remember.
No, I don't think it was.
I don't think it was
Um,
either.
yeah, I'm
So
pretty
yeah, I
sure.
can see how that could throw a wrench in the
Yeah,
works.
because I definitely had I had kept my PS3 around, and part of the reason was I was still playing Walking Dead, and I really wanted to finish that out. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how this resonates. Obviously, this is Sony's answer to Game Pass, and I think a lot of people were comparing it right from the outset. The one thing that I kept seeing pop up was a lot of disappointment around Sony's offering here, and I don't know. Part of it was because the Sony first party titles were not going to be available on day one, as so many Xbox Game Pass titles are. But there's a quality and a business component to that, and I think if you want to have these studios like Insomniac, like Naughty Dog, making games exclusively for PlayStation, you have to make it worth their while financially, and they need to be able to monetize and capitalize on their products. And it's a if you're going to put those products on PlayStation Plus, whatever, what are we I guess it's still just
Um,
PlayStation Plus, but, like,
yeah,
the new
plus extra, plus premium,
bigger plus.
plus
Um,
ultra for all the My Hero Academia fans out there.
if, but if you're gonna do that, then Sony's gotta have to compensate them in some fashion. So, rather than pay upfront to say, "Hey, look, we're gonna buy out your inventory essentially and pay you X million or, 100 million for these games to put it on PlayStation Plus day one," they'll just let those games sell for themselves and let the studios make the money and the publishing houses make the money that way. Um, so I think it's a pretty easy, pretty fair trade off in comparison between the PS Plus and Xbox Game Pass. But I don't know if you were lining them up head to head right now, at least. Do you have a preference? Do you have a lean?
It's really hard to determine that, like, not knowing just having kind of the broad strokes of what each plan offers. Um, it's really close because like, there are a lot of, like, older PlayStation games that you just can't play anymore, and I would love to be able to play those. But then I know the Xbox Game Pass, like, it's, like, new releases and then also a lot of, like, indie games. So I'm undecided as of now. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna have to get both. Just let that decision not be a decision.
Okay, no last dose.
Right. Exactly. And obviously, like, I'm in a fortunate position. I have the ability to afford both. But I mean, the alternative is if I'm probably not buying any other games, right? Like, if I have those two services, I feel like I've pretty much covered everything. Like, and I guess part of it will depend on how long it takes for Sony first party titles to become available on PS Plus Ultra or whatever fictitious name we're coming up with it. Um, but we talked about this too. Our colleague Teddy Amenabar had written about this with games taking longer and longer and longer to beat. Like, my games backlog is huge. If I have to
Yep.
wait a year to play Horizon Forbidden West, which right now that's how it's shaping up, I'm okay with that. Like, I have other great experiences that I'm enjoying right now. I'm playing Elden Ring. I'm playing Warzone. I'm playing Forza, or not Forza. I'm playing Gran Turismo. I will probably be playing the show when that comes out. Like, I have enough stuff to occupy my time as a gamer. Um, so yeah, I think yeah.
Absolutely on that same page. I just got to Loop Hero, which came out at the beginning of last year.
Yes, like, there's so many games in my backlog. Like, I started playing Forbidden West just to get a sense of the game, but I haven't
It's
played 0.
gigantic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and we talked about the side game, and
Oh, yep.
it was Strike or Thrash or
That sounds right. Strike sounds right. It's like a turn-based, what's that called? Like grid, kind of
yeah,
chess-like thing.
and it's like an aggressive verb. That's the name too. I forget what it is, but like just learning that was like a 15-minute tutorial, and I was
Yep.
just like, dude, I don't have time for this. It's like, can I just go like beat down some machines or something and move on? Like, but there is so much there. There's so much content. It looks great. It looks fun. I want to take my time and play it. But if I do it this year or next, I'm not really complaining. So
Mhm.
I think that's a big factor there too. All right, let's move on, shall we? Because we have yet more ground to cover. Next up, in that same news story from earlier in the week, I think that happened maybe 15 minutes after.
It was really close.
Yeah, it was insane. But Nintendo has officially announced that they are moving the Breath of the Wild sequel from 2022 to 2023, spring release 2023. Um, we had a prediction stream, I believe, at the beginning of 2022, and our Nathan Grayson boldly predicted that Breath of the Wild would indeed be kicked to 2023. So, congratulations, Nathan! You win a prize.
He might be psychic.
Yes, he might be psychic. In which case, there will be no prize because you're already psychic. But you knew that because you're psychic.
There you go.
Uh, but this is, it's another year delay. We've had a year in 2021 where pretty much all of the big titles were delayed at least some amount of time. Now we have another year delay. And a year, I feel like the year delay is suddenly in vogue. And I'm curious as to why, it's a year and not months. But what we saw with Halo, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, was that time really came in handy. And
Mhm.
that allowed them to do a lot of really necessary stuff that if they just pushed it a couple months, that probably doesn't have the same effect as just saying, like, look, it's next year. Just forget about it. It's everyone take a deep breath. Let's, reconfigure our roadmap and push ahead. Um,
I
so
think a lot of these studios and E3 as well, are like announcing these dates uh aspirationally, because it's like, well, we hope that in a couple months or a year from now that COVID won't be affecting things. But that's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be so healthy now, and you like buy all these vegetables and fruits, and then you do nothing with them, and then they just rot. So it's like aspirational launch dates,
yes,
but may not be based in reality.
at least I'm alarmed that you know exactly the state of my refrigerator right now. As I think there's a rotting cucumber and some like moldy tomatoes up there. But shame on me. But also, you too might be psychic.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Well,
skeptical.
I was gonna say my fridge also looks like that. I call them aspirational vegetables.
Yes, no, that's a good way of thinking of it. But in terms of the delay now, you know, from a consumer perspective, there's minimal impact to me. I get the game right. Everyone laments, oh no, it's not. Obviously it's anticipated. You want it to come now, but like if it comes and it's broken, you don't
Yep.
want that. That's like the last thing you want because now it's ruined. Like this thing that you've held up in your mind for the past, what is it, 2019? E3 2019 they announced it.
Mhm.
Like
Well,
get it right. Take your time.
there's that one quote by, I think it's Miyamoto, where it's like, "A bad game is bad forever." Like, if you
Yes.
release a bad game, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube after that.
Right, for sure. And we talked about this. We've written about it. I wrote about it. Uh, was it January or February? February, about the Battlefield 2042 release and how 3 months later they hadn't made any headway and the player base was gone. And it's particularly concerning for a game like that that is a live service type of model where you need a very active community and a very active player base. That's not a game that you can pick up a year later and say like, oh yeah, like where was this? You're just those players are gone.
Mhm.
And I think Halo recognized that in 2020 when it made the decision to delay by a year plus technically. Well, the release date was delayed by a year, but the decision was they had a year and a half ish after they made the decision. But that enables you to put polish on the game, to fix a lot of the things that you say, like, look, we got to ship the game, like, we'll get to it later, we'll patch it, we'll update it, we just got to ship it, we got to ship it. And that's what Battlefield did, and it ruined the game. It ruined the
Mhm.
game. It ruined, like, the community response to that game is just so, it's like the dunk tank with an endless line of the entire player base just throwing balls and the rotten tomatoes from my refrigerator at EA and Dice over that product. And that's what you need to avoid in game publishing, right? Like, that's the worst case scenario. The bad game is bad forever.
Yeah. And Breath of the Wild, I think, is arguably the most anticipated game on the calendar right now, just with how big the first one was. And even though it's not a live service game, like the physics in Breath of the Wild and like the just all the systems that you used for like fighting and crafting, like people are still finding Easter eggs in that, and they're still finding new ways to like use those systems. And so it's such a structural level. Like I feel like if you rush that, you can really botch the whole thing.
Totally, totally. And again, the bar is super high. Like,
Yeah.
there are people that think Breath of the Wild is the best game ever made, and I'd be hard pressed. I mean, I know Gene's not here, unfortunately, but really would love to have him. Like, we have Gene has ranked every Zelda title. He's ranked every Mario title. I think every Metroid title.
Every
Gene has
Metroid,
a lot of records.
every Halo
Every
with
Halo
the
title.
with the
Yeah,
multiplayer and single player separate.
two ways, right? I'm really curious to get Gene's definitive all-time best game rankings. But certainly that's probably on his short list. Just having talked with him about it. Cat cameo, there it
Yep,
is.
that
Let's
is my
do it.
cat Cheeto.
Let's go.
He is one of 3 cats in this house. Breath of the Wild, I wouldn't say is like one of my favorite games, but it's one of those games where it's like I can appreciate this impact on video gaming because it's definitely like before and after Breath of the Wild, just with like now everything it's like Horizon is Breath of the Wild, the new Pokemon Arceus is Breath of the Wild. Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel similarly about Elden Ring, where the
Mhm.
game is wonderful. There's so much detail about it to appreciate, and I do. Um, like I alternate. It's a total love-hate relationship playing that game though, where it's like I love it. I boot in, I'm so excited. It's like, all right, let's get some runes and just like get absolutely wrecked by like the first skeleton I see. And it's just like, why do I do this to myself? And I'm not good. I readily admit this. I am not skilled when it comes to this. But it's just I love the experience of dropping into that world, looking around. It's just a fantastic map.
Mhm.
The visuals are just really great. So hopefully, Breath of the Wild 2 will meet that bar that the first one set. Because I think we've talked about expectations, and we will again when we get to the Halo segment here. But I think expectations are really, 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 really high for that. So this seems like the right call to give yourselves more time, put your best effort forward, put something out there you're going to be proud of at the end of the day.
Just real quick before we move on, I'm also curious, honestly, if the Switch can handle Breath of the Wild 2, just because there were areas in Breath of the Wild that I experienced stuttering like pretty consistently. And I experienced a lot of stuttering in the new Kirby game, and I'm like, I hope the Switch can handle it then when because it'll be like 6 years old at that point.
The Was it 27?
2017.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've heard all the rumors of the Switch Pro.
Mhm.
But obviously, I think what we got last year was the OLED model, which is nice, but like not a lot more power there.
Yeah.
Fancier, looks good, but not
Mhm.
a lot more power. So yeah, like, is the Switch going to be a constraint to Breath of the Wild in the way that in a way that next gen consoles aren't going to be for other titles, and will that hold that title back from its potential? I guess we'll have to wait and see until spring
Mhm.
2023. But all right, let's move on to our next topic up for discussion. GDC. So aside from COVID, there were some other big takeaways from that conference. And again, get well soon to Shannon and Nathan and anybody else who was affected by the outbreak there. It's just a rough, rough situation, terrible disease, and obviously we're all too familiar with the lingering effects of the disease. So hope everyone rests up and gets healthy. Um, Top takeaways from the conference, though. Obviously, we sort of went into this knowing what a few of the big talking points were. Um, but what Shannon and Nathan called out in particular was return to the office. That this is sort of an ongoing question for a lot of game development studios. And what does the future of office work look like? Is it 5 days in an office? Is it a lot of remote employees now that you can just work anywhere and there, offices are a thing of bygone era? Um, what are the right conditions? I do not envy HR departments right now
Yeah.
going through these concerns because, as we've seen, there are very valid concerns about contracting COVID even today. Like two vaccinations and a booster later. So the industry really seems to be struggling with what the right answer is going to be. And there's no consensus that I've seen so far. When we were out in Seattle visiting 343 for the Halo story, they hadn't come back yet, and they were curious to hear what our experiences were at the Washington Post, where we had returned to work, albeit for just a week at that point. And we're currently in the office 3 days a week for our employees based out of Washington. Um, what I'm most interested in is what the various iterations on work look like now,
Mhm.
because pretty much anything can work. But what's most effective? And I don't know if we're going to really get an answer to that until we have some more studios coming back to work and seeing, hey, like we're entirely remote and we're making killer games. Like, can that happen, or do you have to have that critical mass of people in the office to have that dialogue, exchange those ideas, and really iterate and strengthen product?
Yeah, especially for more creative jobs, I feel like that back and forth. You can do it kind of on Zoom, but yeah, there is something about being there in person. Um, just what you said about like the new formula can look like anything. Obviously, pandemic horrible, but it is really interesting to see how such a big event like that was needed to kind of shake up things that we because the work week has stayed the same since like the Industrial Revolution. And regardless of like how much research came out saying like 4-day weeks are better, they're more productive, working remote, it took a pandemic for people to finally realize like, oh, maybe this 100-year-old formula isn't the best way. Who would have thought?
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, I think people are just such creatures of habit, right?
Yeah.
And the cliche, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, exists for a reason. Is because we're typically resistant to change because change requires effort, and our effort largely is better spent doing something new and innovative, and then rather than messing with the foundation. But when something else messes with the foundation, we see really interesting results. And I'm fascinated to see what companies do. I mean, right now, like I said, the post is 3 days in, 2 days out. I find that pretty solid for me. Yeah, that's just my personal preference. I like having the office camaraderie and the office conversations and in person meetings 3 days a week. I also like waking up on Monday and Friday and rolling down to my email with my coffee in hand, and I'm still wearing my pajama bottoms. And I like seeing my kids at home during the school week. It's just a nice, more you know more relaxed dynamic that it sort of acknowledges that, as a worker, I'm a responsible adult that's capable of setting my own schedule and getting my work done, and recognizing that deadlines are deadlines, and we have to meet them. Um, I mean, and the same is true in the games industry.
Eh, and who's to say like every worker has to have the same schedule like that? It can also that's totally like people in charge can tailor that. It's just we never have before.
Right.
But there could be benefits to that.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So that was one big takeaway. The other, obviously, is uh, the presence of the CWA, the Communications Workers Association, and unionization support at GDC. This seemed to be a really prominent theme out of San Francisco this year, more so than in the past. There seemed to be several panels, several ads, even that were really speaking about employee conduct and less than flattering ways, sort of assuming that employees were misbehaving, were not being efficient, were not doing all they could be to further the cause of the company. And then counter to that, a growing number of games developers there that are speaking out, that are recruiting for unions, that want to see the union effort go forward. Obviously, we haven't seen much of a union push ever in the games industry, certainly in North America. Obviously, they exist in Europe, and there's a couple. There's one small union in the U.S. now, and Raven Software, as part of Activision Blizzard, is pushing for a second. Um, but this, to me, is been an ongoing issue for probably a decade, more than a decade now. This definitely seems to be the most visible and most prominent we've seen today. I'll be interested to see where we're at next year at this time, and specifically in regards to the Raven unionization efforts.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the game industry is kind of exiting its teenage phase and into its adult phase because I feel like for so many years it was just like, you know, cool, I get to work on games, I get to make games, and like developers would, use that to recruit young people who don't know any better or just people who are like, "Oh, well, I guess this is just the industry." And now it's like, "Well, hold up now. If we wanna be recognized as like art and like a legitimate industry compared to like the movies and TV, like, there's like SAG and whatnot in other media. So why doesn't the gaming industry have that?"
Right, right, and I think that there's obviously, we cover these stories, crunch, worker exploitation, even stuff that's just like it's taken for granted because it's become so ingrained in the culture.
Yeah.
Like those issues have been present for a long time, and I think unless the game publishers and game development studios start addressing those more with a more concerted effort, that's when you're going to see the unionization take that's when it's going to get over the hump. When people believe, look, change is never going to happen unless we unionize. We have to do this.
Yeah.
I think obviously there has been some reluctance up to date. Otherwise, it would have happened already. And I think that what will erode that reluctance is if they think that they're hopeless. That if they think change cannot come without the help of a union. So again, interested to see where we are a year from now. One of the other big takeaways, obviously, the consolidation effort. We've already seen we've seen the Sony add Bungie. We've seen Microsoft add Activision Blizzard. Um, this seems to be the trend of the future, is or in certainly the present of 2022 as well.
I was trying to
Um,
remember who bought Zynga? That was the 3rd
Take
big
two,
one.
take two.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is definitely feeling like a game of musical chairs is the wrong analogy. Maybe it's sort of musical chairs, but like everyone's looking for a dance partner right now, right? If you are a game publisher and you don't have a way of selling your own games, and you need to be on Steam, you need to be on the Epic Game Store, you need to be on PlayStation Store, Xbox Store. Um, like it feels like those are the sort of developers and publishers that are looking to get acquired. And I don't know. Everyone talks about Ubisoft as sort of like the next sort of marquee market or marquee publisher to get acquired. Um, and it's easy to see why, because there's a lot of similarities with Ubisoft as there are with Activision Blizzard. You have an embattled company as far as ongoing sexual harassment claims and allegations that have dogged them for years now.
Yeah.
Um, so, and obviously they have the portfolio, right? You do have Assassin's Creed, you have Far Cry, you have Watch Dogs, you have the titles to provide value to a Microsoft, to a Sony. Um, but I'm more interested in the consolidation efforts for independent studios, and I'm interested in because think about it in terms of Microsoft, right? Microsoft buying up all these indie studios makes a ton of sense because Game Pass, you can just pop
Yeah.
their stuff right on the Game Pass, and then these indie studios don't have to worry about marketing in and selling their own games because they just one easy application solution putting their game on Game Pass. Um, we in our game length story, we had forget if it was somebody from CD Projekt Red, I think it was, saying that Game Pass was going to inspire a lot more chapter-based games or smaller,
Mhm.
more contained 10-hour games, 5-hour games, something that you can complete in, 1 or 2 nights, and then you wait for the next installment. And I
Yeah,
think that model works really well for independent developers. It certainly would oh god, I'm blanking on who made The Walking Dead, Telltale.
that's fine.
Yeah, would have been great for them. Um, so I'm really curious to see what trends in consolidation continue over the coming year. Who else is sort of on the market? Who's getting bought up? That's a trend that I will continue to monitor with great interest. I don't know. You had any thoughts on that as well?
I'm really interested in the, kind of like the governmental response. Um, coming from so, like, before I started working at Launcher, I did, tech journalism at Gizmodo, and during my time there, I think that's when kind of, like, Congress and lawmakers realized how big tech was because it was, like, after, the 2016 election and, like, realizing how much influence tech had on, everyone, and there was kind of this, like, rush to, uh, regulate that industry, and I'm wondering if we're gonna see something similar with video games, and if not, I'm wondering what kind of incident would then prompt that response.
That's a great question. Regulation is definitely an ongoing storyline around consolidation, and yeah, I think I don't know what that event would look like
Yeah,
because
so I'm, like, cautious, but not I'm like, it's not what's it red flags aren't going off right now, but, yeah, I am, like, treading carefully and, keeping up with what's going on.
for sure, for sure. Chase in the chat also mentions Rayman, another Ubisoft property there. So that could be very appetizing to certain publishers. Moving on, let's see what else. Obviously, Ukraine also mentioned, very prominent out in GDC. A lot of developers are trying to support the Ukrainian relief effort. I don't know if you saw at least the other day, Fortnite announced they had raised $100 million.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
I know. I mean, first of all, it just it gives you a sense of how big the
A big
economy
fort,
around that
yeah.
game is, right? But also $100 million since they've started their Ukrainian relief efforts, which I believe are about a month old at this point. The war began about a month ago now. Just remarkable amount of assistance being raised for charitable organizations working with Ukrainian humanitarian causes. Um,
Yeah, I know,
uh,
like, Humble Bundle did a thing,
yep,
Itch.io
yep.
did a thing. It's really been really cool to see, like, so many people come together, for one cause.
For sure, for sure. Now, obviously, as we've reported on a lot, the gaming industry is very strong in Ukraine. There are a lot of Ukraine-based developers that have been impacted significantly by this war, as all civilians have in that country, for that matter. Um, but it's amazing and continues to be amazing to me, just the sheer level of fundraising the games industry can provide when it sets its mind to it, whether it's
Mhm.
charity streams on Twitch or now something like this with Fortnite. It is remarkable how effective it can be. Like gaming really is the 21st century's telethon.
Yeah,
And I feel
like
like the 20th
like
century telethon didn't exist that long, but still.
I was just gonna say it reminds like, you hear the statistic that, like, gaming is the biggest media franchise. Hello, Cheeto has stuff to say.
Guys, enter the
But
chat.
but it doesn't really hit home until moments like this where it's like, "Dang, they'd have this much money, just they can access whenever."
Right. It's crazy. It's crazy. And obviously a lot of it is incremental donations. It's not like, hey, I'm gonna, I'm trying to think who the famous foundation is that always sponsors everything. PBS always cites like the John and Jane Smith Foundation, who wrote a check for, however many million. Like a lot of this stuff is like $5, $1, and it's just aggregate. And I think again, that just it should tell us all something about how the scope of the video game industry from a player standpoint. Forget the publishers, forget the games for a second, just how much interest there is from a player standpoint around video games. So just remarkable stuff there. Moving on to NFTs. you know what? I don't even want to talk about NFTs right now. Like I don't know about you, Elise, but my inbox NFT pitches, crypto. You'll never guess. Like, this is the revolutionary game that is changing gaming with blockchain technology and NFTs. And like, look, I get it, but I don't get it. Like, it's yes, it's a thing, and people are. But to me, it's a Silicon Valley buzzword. Like,
Yeah.
I get no benefit out of even owning an NFT, right? I don't know why I would want to buy one. And it's hard for me to sort of grasp, even though I understand the applications in the gaming world, why major publishers would move in that direction en masse. Like, I could see experimenting, seeing how that pans out. But as we've seen from a critical reaction of players so far, and even some developers out at GDC, it's just like eye rolls at
Yeah.
best. Like that,
And it's like
what's your take there?
it's kind of like the combination of like uh buying into this trend, like that's an eye roll, but then also like when we know the really bad environmental impacts of these like of crypto mining and NFTs. So it's just not a good look either way. And you look like you're hopping on a trend and you're hurting the environment. So
Win-win.
yeah, though I do think we should call them nifties. That's my final word on it. Because then if I would love to see crypto bros talking about nifties. That would be very funny.
You gotta check out my latest nifties,
You gotta
brah.
check out my Nifty, man. I love this Nifty.
Shut
Like
up.
if they're gonna talk about it, make it sound stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I like that recourse there. All right, well, let's move on. Obviously, GDC. There's still some more stuff to talk about. Um, we don't even have it on our rundown anymore because there was just so much happening. But obviously, we have to note that Activision Blizzard settled its lawsuit with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. There's so many acronyms I've been dealing with this week. I'm
Yep.
just trying to keep them straight. Chad, if I get anything wrong, I apologize. I need more coffee anyway.
And
But
that was the state lawsuit, correct?
it
Not
was
the
a state
federal one?
lawsuit, but the EEOC is a federal entity, and that is it was a federal settlement. So right now, people who were involved in or who worked at Activision Blizzard and wanted to bring a claim against the company can opt into the EEOC settlement, which is of $18 million for claimants, but that would disqualify them from the state lawsuit, and we don't know how
Gotcha.
that will resolve itself yet. The DFEH, another acronym, Department of Fair Employment and Housing in California, is still working that case against Activision Blizzard. That court case is still ongoing. And there had been a lot of, I was about to say something rude and inappropriate, but a little infighting. We'll call it infighting between those two agencies, those two government agencies, over this settlement because the EEOC sees this as a really fair settlement that will bring relief to victims and bring some closure. And the DFEH sees $18 million, sees what Activision Blizzard makes in like a day, and
Yeah.
is like, "Hey, this isn't. No, we can get more. We can get more." And really fought the EOC settlement until as recently as this week, when a judge basically summarily put them in their place and said, "I'm signing the order. Please be quiet now."
Hmm.
So it's interesting to me in looking at the settlement, two things mainly. One, that this does and will impact the DFEH case. I thought when the DFEH brought it against Activision, it's a very unusual step for that body to represent the claimants against a corporation like Activision Blizzard, and it really sort of signaled to me and to some others who we interviewed that they were really trying to use this as a industry shaping case to try and root out some of these institutional problems in the gaming industry, and make an example of Activision Blizzard. That becomes a lot harder now when the potential damage is, the example on the books now is $18 million.
Yep.
That's nothing. That's
Yeah, it,
nothing
it
for a
it
gaming
puts a
company.
number to it.
Right. And yes, I would love $18 million. I would love $100,000. But that's not going to change an industry that deals in billions and
Yeah.
hundreds of billions. Like that's not going to,
That's a Tuesday.
yes, it's a rounding error. It really is. And that's the thing that I think is the biggest takeaway for me. Earlier this year we had Riot settle its lawsuit for a lot of the same issues, sexual harassment and also discrimination. Um, but I gotta Google this really quick. I think it was $100 million settlement that they reached. It's too bad Shannon's other brother because she would know this off the top of her head. Um, yeah, $100 million settlement. I should have trusted my instincts. They reached that in December. So already you have an example in front of court saying like, hey, Riot said this was $100 million issue, and they settled for 100 million. You're saying you're going to have them give up 18. Meanwhile, the Blizzard report included, a far more aggressive picture of assault, harassment, and
Just very heinous things.
yes, and it's hard to equate the two sums, frankly, and I think that's my biggest takeaway. Is I'm a little surprised at how this shook out, and I thought that this happened a little fast, and that the EEOC was very straight ahead, and they said this is what we reached. It was, as they pointed out in our news story, it's a big win for them. Like
Yeah.
18 million is the second largest sexual harassment settlement they've ever reached. That's notable. But to me, that also speaks about a bigger problem, perhaps about our legal system.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the stakes are so high too because it's like these are huge international companies, and unless it's gonna hurt their pocketbook, they don't really have incentive to change how they're doing things now. Especially because a lot of this goes on behind the scenes, and, like, in this case, it came to light, but a lot of the time it doesn't. Um, so just the stakes are really high, and so it is kinda sad to see such a low amount. It's like, "Oh, that's how much that much pain is worth." So it kinda signals to other companies that, like, they can do it so long as it's like fines where it's like, it's only illegal for poor people. Like, if you have enough money, you can do it.
exactly. Tow my car, I'll pick it up later.
Yeah.
Tow my Porsche. Um, but yeah, no, it's worth noting that, and to me, obviously, the single biggest takeaway there was the disparity between the Riot sentiment and the Activision Blizzard sentiment. All right, well, let's move on to Halo because we should probably start wrapping up in the near future, and we have a ton to talk about. I literally could talk about the Halo coverage we've done for the past week for an entire week, but I won't. I'll spare everyone. But as some of people have seen, hopefully by now, we wrote a large feature detailing 343 Industries and Microsoft's ambitions for building a Halo universe. Obviously, the universe sort of exists already across comic books, across novels, across machinima, across anime, but it has yet to push into the Marvel or Disney, Star Wars level of universes. I guess universes. Yeah.
I think because it's Marvel Cinematic Universe, Halo Lore Universe, HLO. Oh, HLO, because it's Halo. Okay, 343. You need to pay me for that.
Yeah.
I'm trademarking that right now.
But yes. So now they're expanding onto linear television, or not linear television, streaming television with Paramount Plus. This new series, second episode, I believe, debuted today. And it was really fascinating to be out there. First of all, the Halo Museum. If you're a Halo fan, get yourself to the Halo Museum. It is insanely cool. Like there's just so much there. It's so creative. I grew up on Star Wars, love Star Wars. It's all I've always credited Star Wars with really developing my sense of wonder and creativity and just like, thinking that hey, this is possible because why not? Sure the Force could be real or
Mhm.
variant of it. Why not? And
And the Halo Museum's at 343, right?
yes, yeah, I should mention that. Yes, that's key information. I should
In
have put that in
Seattle.
there. In Seattle, well, Redmond to be specific, but yes,
Redmond, sorry.
just outside Seattle. But yeah, like the props that they've used for some of the promotional material, like the random stuff, like Master Chief chewing gum, salt and pepper shakers, just like a laser tag kit. Like they had all this random stuff, and then they have like obviously the life size models of like the Covenant elite soldiers, the Spartans, the life size weapons, some cosplay stuff that fans have made over the years. Apparently, it was made by a fan, but there's a 100+ pound gravity hammer that they just keep in like this sarcophagus in the corner of the
Cool.
museum. It is awesome. It almost broke my back just trying to pick it up. Like, it is not
You are
balanced.
not worthy.
I am not worthy. I cannot wield this thing. I will never be a Spartan. Apparently, like, members of the Seattle Seahawks were out there just, like, slinging this thing around, which
I
just
I
reminded me
need I
again how
need
fun.
footage of that. That sounds hilarious.
I would like to see the kicker try it too. Like, yeah, the lineman I can get, but, bring on the punter or something like that. But yeah, so just an amazing setting. But all of our conversations, and we had 8 hours worth of interviews out there with John Elker, and Gene Park was able to join us for a good portion of a couple of them for via Zoom, or excuse me, Microsoft Teams, because of course it was Microsoft Teams.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's fascinating to hear their ambitions. And the single biggest takeaway I had, both with this show and with Halo Infinite, was they're really just trying to cast a big net. Like, this is the audience acquisition for a new era of Halo. We have this awesome TV show that we're trying to produce. We have this awesome game. Come play our awesome game and watch our awesome show and look at how awesome Master Chief is. I could see the logic there. Like, there's a lot going on there. It's a revered property. The game already has a ton of fans, but this gets into this tricky dance that they're now in, where they have all these existing fans who just want more Halo and no Halo, and that's the experience they love, and just give us more of that. And now they're trying to onboard all these other people in various fashions, either through free to play Halo Infinite, Halo on PC, or this new game. And now that you have this potentially larger audience, but now you got to make everybody happy, and people are coming at it from different appreciation levels. It's a really tricky strategy to pull off, and I'll be interested to see how it shakes out.
Yes, because, gamers famously opinionated. So
A little, just
so
a
it's
little, we smidge.
difficult to, like, not over explain, but then also, like, make sure people who don't know Halo, know what's going on. And real quick, Mike, how do you visit the Halo Museum asking for a friend?
How
Is
does
what
one
chat
visit
says.
Florida?
Asking for a friend, not for him.
Personally, you have to get on a plane or get yourself to Redmond, Washington. I actually don't know if they do. I'm sure they do tours. I think you probably have to set it up with 343's, front desk or something. I actually don't know if it's an official museum open to the public even. So I may have been advertising this all wrong, and I'm just like, now I'm basically just bragging about something awesome that we got to do, and I feel terrible. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully the public can
Maybe if
actually,
you cry, then they'll let you in.
yeah,
Hashtag go and
yeah, just
cry.
go up the window. And just, yeah, exactly. But but yeah, no, I'll report back on that because that is gettable information. I'll look into it.
I'm
Um,
wondering with the Halo lore if they have any plans to, how when Disney started making Star Wars movies and they were like, okay, all those games and books, nah, that's fantasy. I'm wondering with just how extensive Halo lore is, if a move like that is going to be necessary just to be able to bring new people on who don't have the 20 years of history.
right. Yeah. No. And then you have this segmented audience, and I'm fascinated by this because like I mentioned, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and then I all like my entire life, I just grew up wanting another Star Wars movie. After Return of the Jedi, is all I wanted. And then the Phantom Menace came out. Yeah, yeah, things changed. It was just not. Darth Maul, awesome. Anakin as a 9-year-old,
Yeah.
punch me in the face. I'd rather be abused than watch that.
You know
You
that really cool villain you like? Now he's a kid.
that hulking, intimidating half man, half machine, with the red lightsaber. He's gonna do spins in space because
Mhm.
those are good tricks. Oh man, the memories. But that's those movies worked for a certain portion of the Star Wars audience, and then you just see this continued fracturing and this ripple effect. People hated the most recent sequels, the latest Skywalker trilogy,
I
where
still haven't watched the most recent movie because if I don't watch it, Rey and Kylo Ren never get together.
yes, which
So I could
we're
just
gonna talk
pretend that
about.
didn't happen.
That's a whole nother stream for that one thing right there is a 2-hour rant. I'll spare the world. Um, but that's what Halo's contending with now, where it's just like you have these people who have grown up with this, and it's very sincere. And Hawken, one of our producers here, we were talking pre-stream about just the simple decision in the show to take off Master Chief's helmet and show his face is like the most controversial thing ever. And it's just like if I were coming to it from an outsider, or as Otto Bathurst, who we interviewed for a Q&A today, mentioned, like he came at it from an outsider's perspective. You're trying to create drama, you need facial reactions. Like if everyone's this stoic, masked figure, that's
Yeah.
really hard to convey emotion.
And you don't have the luxury of a first person perspective like you would in video games.
Correct. I mean, just think about it in terms of like, RoboCop or even the Terminator. It's just like those characters were one note characters, seek and destroy. Like it's hard to have RoboCop look sympathetic. I guess they did a little bit, but I'm dating myself now. I'm generally curious how many viewers have actually seen RoboCop along with me. But anyway, it's a tricky balance to pull off. And I think we've already seen two instances of blowback from diehard fans of the games where they're like, "Whoa, what are you doing to my Master Chief?" The helmet
That's
and
sacrilegious.
exactly, showing his face, and then there was just a quote from one of the executive producers saying, like, "Yeah, we didn't really refer to the games at all." And everyone's just like, "Well, what the heck?" And look, I get it, but there's a lot of context around it that was omitted from a lot of the outrage in Reddit forums, and it's basically like they were firmly rooted in the games. 343 sat them all down and were like, "This is Halo. Here's everything you need to know." So obviously they were versed in the games, but they're not going to get caught up on game mechanics. It's TV. It's a different format, and I think that's something that reasonable people who are fans of the series need to get used to. It is not a game. It's going to be different. You have to have different dramatic devices and be able to tell different character stories when you don't have somebody literally controlling this character. And that's the key difference, and that's what I think is going to determine if the series stands up or fails. And actually, Otto Bathurst said the same thing. But that's why I love The Witcher. It wasn't because of the game. It's because the stories and the show rocked. It was amazing.
And that struggle's not unique to Halo. Like so many video game properties have struggled to uh impress that same connection when you aren't literally controlling the character.
Absolutely. We were talking again. We probably we should stop having our best conversations before the stream. Uh, but how few gaming properties have been successfully adapted to TV or films. I mean, John made the good example of Pokemon. Like, yeah, job well done, excellent work. Then we have Mario Brothers. Dear God, like the spectrum is so wide and it's so difficult, and a lot of it is just people that aren't familiar with the aesthetic, like they're not familiar with the universe. I'm fascinated, and I really enjoyed Gene's perspective when he reviewed the show, that like he thought they got a lot of like the Halo universe, the aesthetic right, and that it was pretty promising. And he's excited to see where the series goes, and I know he's seen the first two episodes because that's what he watched for the review. So episode 3 and beyond, I'm eager to chat with Gene and see what he continues to think of the series, because I do think they've gotten a lot of it pretty. I won't say right, because I don't think there is a right, but like there's a grittiness to it. Like it doesn't feel like super sleek space like feel. It's like,
Chromey.
yeah, exactly. Like there's hardship, right? Like from the outset, you don't have you have sort of the two disparate sides of humanity, people who are fighting for freedom and obviously are the have-nots, and then the more oppressive Space Force. I shouldn't call them Space Force anymore because we have a Space Force now. It's
Yep,
very
real one.
weird to think. Um,
I think also the struggle with like anyone who's making a video game into another piece of media has the work cut out for them when it comes to the player character, because of course people are going to be precious over them, and especially in a case like Halo where like the player character is just kind of a blank slate for then you to impress yourself, like you to pretend to be that person, and then you're like, well, how do we satisfy every Halo fan who saw themselves in Master Chief? And that's just not going to happen.
right. No, I mean, the one thing I want to see at some point. It's just a great Easter egg for fan service. Would just have a Master Chief just like 360 no scope somebody like that would just be awesome. Like, just please put that in the show. That's all I'm asking. Just that one thing. Take his helmet off as often as you want, but give me a 360 no scope. But have you watched the first episode yet?
I have not yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be
Uh,
curious to hear your thoughts on it too, because you played one game,
I
Halo 1.
played, yeah, I played whichever one was on the Xbox 360. I had friends who played it, and I would play that one with them. And then I really liked the League show. And so I'm kind of in like a, well, let me check out all these other video game related shows since I knew nothing about League, and now I love that.
Yeah, no, Shannon was telling me that too. I should check that out. I haven't gotten a chance to watch
It's
it yet.
so pretty, but I'm also like a huge animation nerd too. So just from an animation perspective, like every single episode, I was like, this is so pretty. I love what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna need a new show pretty soon. We're just finishing up
Arcane, sorry, not the League
Arcane.
show.
Yeah, yeah, it has a name, but yeah, no, we're just finishing up The Last Kingdom, so I'm gonna need a new show because series is ending, and I'm very sad. If you've never seen Last Kingdom, everyone go watch Last Kingdom. It's very good. It's campy and hysterical, and the accents are amazingly questionable, but it is some good stuff. I should mention also in our Halo coverage, there's an ongoing debate in the multiplayer world. People are not happy with the Halo property as a game right now because there hasn't been anything new happening in Halo for quite some time. Basically since launch, season
Yeah,
2 has been delayed till May,
and
and
and the issues that with like leveling up that have been present since launch are still there.
right. And Gene just wrote about this yesterday for us. It's up on launcher.gg right now. Um, this gets at the thing I've referenced a couple times already, which is fan expectations, right? Obviously, there are very real developmental challenges around making a top tier AAA video game, one that's going to impress everybody, and did at launch. People gushed about Halo. They thought
Mhm.
it was the best first person shooter on the market at the time, and they're probably right. Um, and now here we are in March, no, almost April, a couple hours till April, and nothing has really changed substantially. In our interviews up at 343, Tom French, the multiplayer director, was telling us that they're really working hard on firming up the foundation of the game. Like they had to really work to retool everything just to get it beyond the Halo 5 engine, which they had to completely remake, apparently. Um, and now, before they start building on top of the Halo Infinite stuff, they have to make sure that they're on firm ground. That logic tracks for me. If you start building on an unsteady foundation, you're just begging for glitches and more problems down the road. And I think that's the recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend some extra time, get it right now. Like you're fine. You have a little bit of the afterglow of the release still. If they get it right in the next 6 months, if season 2 drops in May and there's new maps, there's new content, and Forge follows quickly in the summer, Forge being the user creation mode, um, I think it'll work itself out and people will be happy. Um, but I don't know. As a consumer, at least, what's your take on being promised something and then it not being delivered on time?
Well, I think with live service games, one of the like core components that make them so difficult to get right is the fact that like you have this constant stream of feedback and you have the ability to change things in it. Like if a AAA game single player, oh, I think we have another cat back there. That's Ramon. Um, when it's just like, a game that you release like a one and done, people have their opinions, but it's like other than like patches, devs can't really do anything. But then when you have a live service game, the devs are hearing this feedback, and if they're not doing anything, that's just poison on the game at that point, because that's how you burn goodwill, that's how you burn fans. And so it puts a lot of expectation on the developer to then be on the ball when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And Gene referenced something similar in his story when Activision launched Warzone and it took off the way it did. Basically, every Activision Blizzard studio is now working on Call of Duty, and like that's what it takes to do
Yep.
a live service and be a content machine. Like there is such a volume of just stuff that you have to make just to keep players interested and engaged, and keep Reddit happy. That I don't think people really fully appreciate the level of work and the scale that's required.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
like big rewards, but big costs and constant cost.
exactly, exactly. So I think from a user expectation standpoint, I do think people can be unreasonable when it comes to like, well, why don't I have this now? That said, I do think publishers and game developers have an obligation to better advertise and market what they're trying to deliver. Because saying like, look, we're going to have this live service thing, it's just going to be this nonstop stream of content, sounds great, but like you're welching on your promise.
Yeah, it's like,
You're
do you have the infrastructure to support to back up that claim?
Exactly, exactly. Like the scale doesn't seem to be there right now, and they need to get it back on track. And that's where I think a lot of games go wrong. Like certainly, like Battlefield 5 even had this problem before Battlefield 2042, where it's just like, hey, we're gonna have all this stuff. Oh, and we're gonna have this battle royale. Actually, that's not gonna be there on launch, but we'll get to it eventually. And like again, dragged. I think it was March. The game released in November, and I think it was March before the BR released. And by that point, Black Ops 4 had released Blackout, the first Call of Duty Battle Royale mode, and I don't think anyone really cared for Battlefield 5's BR mode anymore.
Now that I think about it, it kind of reminds me of like the years after the Wii came out and like PlayStation and Microsoft like came out with like this has motion controls. They're not the best, but we have them. And I kind of feel like it's that with Battle Royale now, where it's like, oh, that's what people want. We're gonna make our version, but then you don't stop to think like, can we even do that in a way
Yep.
that people will like?
Yeah, no, it is amazing, and this certainly isn't limited to the games industry, but how much corporations will chase the shiny new object, and it's like, oh, that's what people want. That's the silver bullet. That's the answer. Pivot to video. Oh
Yep.
wait. And
I
I,
was
I
thinking of Fortnite with Among Us. Their
Yep,
that mode. It's like, oh yeah, that's what people want. Let's do it.
just put it in there. And you were a sandbox, so of course we can.
Hmm.
And I mean, to Fortnite's credit, I thought they did it pretty well. I just wish they had, actually worked with Among Us to make it happen instead of
Hmm.
blatantly stealing the concept. But anyway, we should probably wrap this up. But man, a lot has happened in 4 days, and of
Yeah,
course, all of our reporters are sick.
a lot has happened since January 1st.
Yes, it's been a very busy year. Hopefully, there's a respite of some kind. It's good that stuff's happening. I think that's exciting. We want to keep people apprised of the news, obviously, with Launcher and the Washington Post here. We want to go report on stuff, but
But
a little,
y'all need to wait until our reporters are feeling better
yeah, can we
and
just
aren't
like
sick.
cool the jets for a little while? Let's just like ease back, have a margarita or something. Just have a little ceasefire here. Let's go. All right. So I think that I'm going through the rundown here. I don't think we have anything else to hit on, but thank you everyone for joining us this week. It's a pleasure as always to be here. I'm Mike Hume, the editor of Launcher, joined by Alyse Stanley, and we'll be back next week, hopefully with our regularly scheduled crew of Nathan and Shannon for another WaPo Stomo. In the meantime, don't forget to like this broadcast here and also smash, do not just press, but smash that subscribe button because your mouse will thank you later and so will we. So again, for myself, Mike Hume, for Lee Stanley, thanks again for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.